Hi everyone. Today I wanted to discuss the concept of tanking in Legion. There are three competing styles consisting of the old school style, new school style, and oh shit, wait, I'm a tank? I like to refer to them as the protection, the hybrid, and the scumbag styles. First, let's discuss the old school tanking method, otherwise known as the protection style. Back in Vanilla, Burning Crusade, and Wrath of the Lich King, your job was to hold threat, which was actually hard in Vanilla, much harder than Skittish today, and to survive for as long as possible. Tank DPS was irrelevant and essentially non-existent. Tanks did roughly 10% of the damage as a normal DPS in Vanilla and Burning Crusade. It was bumped up to roughly 50% in Wrath to allow tanks to solo world quests in an acceptable time frame. There were a couple items people could, pick up to increase their DPS as a tank, but they were rare and more of a niche for soloing. Talents were all about survival and not so much DPS. Side note, it was common for prot warriors to put talents in other trees. Back then you had 3 trees, and they would put talents in one of the other DPS trees so they can increase their threat. Even then, their damage was still pretty much non-existent. So how many people remember waiting until 5 Sunders before DPSing or having to wand Onyxia during the entire first phase? There were fights designed around a specific set of gear, whether it was fire resist for Ragnaros, poison resist for Huhuran, shadow resist for Mother Shaz, or a 100% block, dodge, parry for Hiroka Noob. There were those fights that required an entire set of gear just to survive. Tank DPS being so terrible combined with surviving actually being a challenge, DPS was never really thought about. When we moved into Cataclysm, tanks were given this crazy buff called Vengeance, where we did more damage based on the amount of damage we received. This could create crazy situations where tanks were the top DPS on giant AoE pulls. Once you overgeared the content, tanks could take off their gear, on farm content, they would take off their gear, so they would receive more damage, so they could actually do more damage. This was later changed in Mists of Pandaria. The damage the tanks could do through Vengeance was based on the unmitigated damage they received from whoever they're fighting. The reason for this is you no longer have to take off your gear just to do damage, which is kind of good. Now, Kata and Miss is the time where I took a break, so if I'm missing something, please let me know in the comments. But back then, stamp trinkets were often sought after. Stamina was socketed in gear, enchanted on gear. External defensive cooldowns were rotated on tanks on every boss fight. Shield Wall was a 30-minute cooldown in Vanilla, and it was not reset on a raid wipe. This was a different time for tanking, where this classic take fantasy comes alive. This immovable object, the shield sitting in front of the group as they pump out their DPS. So, what does this have to do with Legion? Well, you can still build in this fashion, and it'll work just fine. So let me show you how to do that on your Vengeance Demon Hunter. And here we are. So let's take a look at the protection build. So for talents, there's a couple talent builds you can use for this. You could use in the tier 99, any of these 3 are fine. None of them really give you a lot of protection. In Mythic Plus, Abyssal Strike can give you more Infernal Slams. And Razor Spikes can give you a slow, but that's just maybe if you need to cut in Necrotic. But overall, whatever you want in this tier, I would highly recommend Razor Spikes because you're spamming Shear and you're going to be spamming Soul Cleave. Tier 100, now this gets a little tricky. If you plan on running Feed the Demon, then you sort of need Fallout, unless it's going to be a single target. The only exceptions is if you're doing high Mythic Pluses, like Mythic Plus 18, 19, 20, 23, something like that, then Burning Alive might be better due to the spread of Fiery Brand. So I would go with Fallout, but if you're pulling in a lot of trash that hits hard, then Burning Alive is fine. 102, you can go with either Flame Crash or Fell Blade for the pain generation. I've not really seen this around on a lot of people, even with the protection style, and they seem to go with Flame Crash more. 104, it is almost always Feed the Demon. With this build, you're looking at keeping up Demon Spikes 100% of the time. This is where Fallout and Feed the Demon really just works well together. In the off chance you want to go with Burning Alive, and you want to worry about not dying, you can go with Soul Rending and Last Resort. That will also work. But most situations you want to go 100% uptime of Demon Spikes, which is Feed the Demon, and Fallout. Row 106 is, again, one of those rows that has no effect on survivability. If you need to group stuff together, Sigil Chains. If you're raiding, either concentrated or quickened. This row it really doesn't matter. 108, you have two options. Option 1 is for Sustain. That gives you Spirit Bomb. This gives you 20% more healing on all the damage you do. So Spirit Bomb is for the sustained healing. For the second choice, you can go Blade Turning, actually. This will allow you to generate 70% more pain with Shear whenever you parry. And this actually does generate quite a bit of extra pain, which you just keep soul cleaving and soul cleaving and soul cleaving. For the sake of the rotation, I'm going to show you the Spirit Bomb build. If you want to use a Blade Turning build, it's easy. Just do the rotation I'm doing. Just don't cast Spirit Bomb. Row 110, for at least Nighthold, I would go with Soul Barrier. This will give you the highest amount of healing out of everything in row 110. The other option is Last Resort. Again, cheat death, it'll save your life. However, if you're looking at the healing that you need and the healing that you do to yourself, Soul Bearer is the better of the two. For Nighthold, Demonic Infusion is not used for a defensive cooldown. This would still be a defensive cooldown in fights in Tomb of Sargeras if they have something like Ursak, where Demon Spike's uptime is very important. But for Nighthold, Demonic Infusion is not worth it. For Mythic Plus, Demonic Infusion is not worth it, because there's so many ads for Fallout and Feed the Demon, you're always at 100% anyways. So this is the build I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the one with Soul Barrier and Spirit Bomb, because you have to work in your rotation. For gear, for this you want to run with the 4-piece tier 19. This will give you the reduced cooldown on Demon Spikes based on how much pain you spent using Soul Cleave. Since we're Soul Cleaving all the time, the 4-piece has a huge bonus, so you want to use the 4-piece. This will also help you increase your uptime with Demon Spikes. You want to use a Dark Moon card. This increases your armor. This is the best physical damage reduction trinket in the game. Ignore that it's 875, but it is the best trinket you can have for damage mitigation. Other trinkets you could use, like, I don't have it, but the Withered Heart is pretty good. You can use like a versatility trinket. Stat Stick, that works. I hate to say this, but if you absolutely have to, you could also use a Haft, because remember, this build's all about you not dying. There's better trinkets than the Haft, but if you don't have better, you can get away with that. You could use Stam trinkets, which I don't have any on my person. I have in the bank, like the Stam trinket from Scorpion. This whole build's centered around taking the least amount of damage and healing yourself as much as you can. Your DPS does not matter, you don't care. You're the type of person who will not look at DPS charts. So, how this breaks down, well, let's look at legendaries first before I do that. So, legendary wise, you would use Prides, and you can use Archimonde's Hatred Reborn, two great trinkets for survivability. For magic damage, you can use Cloak of Fell Flames. This is for any magic fights to mitigate as much damage as possible. The 15% damage reduction is huge. Other legendaries that could be useful is the Fragment of the Betrayer's Prison. This is for Leech, 15% Leech while Demon Spikes is active. Now you should have 100% uptime of Demon Spikes, so this should give you 15% Leech almost the entire time. Now, mind you, Prides is better than the Fragment, because Prides will absorb more damage than the Fragment can heal you for in the same time period. And absorbing damage is always better than healing damage. But if you have this, this is still good. If you combine the 15% leech with the 20% from Spirit Bomb, that's a lot of self-healing. The other legendaries are not really used for survivability. The bracers are used for uptime of your sigils, but that's mainly just for CC and utility. The belt can be used for survivability, but in very rare situations. This includes Mythic Tichondrius if you are 6 tanking the slimes. My Mythic Tichondrius guide shows how this works, and if you use that strat, this belt is actually used as the second highest heal out of all my heals that fight. But those are rare situations. So those are your legendaries. For artifact points, you'll be looking at stuff that increases your survivability. So you're looking at the Soul Cleave heal. You'll be looking at just raw max health. You'll be looking at the Metamorphosis health. And possibly even, I hate to say this, but possibly even parry. Parry has a lot of diminishing returns because of Demon Spikes. And that would really be it for those. Maybe even more time on your Metamorphosis, but even then I would say it's, yeah, not very good. For consumables, you would use a Stam Flask, because again, you don't care about your damage. You would use an Unbending Potion when you need the armor, but you'll probably always pre-pot a Prolonged Power Potion, because you don't really normally need the extra armor on the pole. So you'd probably pre-pot the Prolonged Power, and then use the Armor Potion at any time in the fight you need the extra armor. Food buffs, you would go with Versatility Food, and you would go with the Stamina buff from the Feast, one of these two. Stat-wise, you would go for Versatility, then Mastery, then Haste, then Crit. You want to just sit down and you really want to just maximize the amount of mitigation you have. So let's look at the rotation. Let's go over here to one of these dummies. So this rotation, one that actually hits me. This rotation is all about spamming Shear and spamming Soul Cleave. Trying to keep 100% uptime of Demon Spikes and keep up Soul Barrier as much as possible. So on this, you're saving your Fiery Brand for moments of the fight that you need to use it. Now we're talking about like Spellblade's Annihilation, you want to save it for that. Crosis when you have 5 stacks and the tank taunts off you. Anytime in the fight where you're going to be taking a ton of damage, you want to save your Fiery Brand for. There might be some fights where you want to use Fiery Brand and cooldown because there are no spike times of the fight, and that's okay. But with this style, you want to get the most usage out of your Fiery Brand to mitigate the most amount of damage. So you would normally save this for specific times of the fight. So when you do this, you're not opening up your Fiery Demise window on the pull, so you're not maximizing your damage. Again, this build, you don't care about your damage. So on the pull, we're going to jump in, and we're going to start the rotation. The whole idea is we want to put everything on cooldown, get Demon Spikes up, and get your Spirit Bomb on the target ASAP. So we're going to jump in, Immolate, then Soul Cover, and as soon as we get the first fragment, throw up Spirit Bomb, and then get up Soul Cleave, and start spamming. And put everything else on cooldown, and once Demon Spikes comes off, put it back up, keep spamming Shear, spam Soul Cleave, Shear, Demon Spikes back up, you want to Soul Cleave again, and what we should be doing is be working in, keep up Spirit Bomb by the way, is to be working in Soul Barrier, so you want Soul Barrier up, and just keep hitting, keep jumping, keep Soul Cleaving, and you want to get 100% uptime or as close as you can with Demon Spikes, while keeping everything else on cooldown. And keep up 100% uptime of Spirit Bomb. So all we're doing, same rotation. I keep trying to fracture. It's built into my genetics at this point. So yeah, all you're doing is spamming Shear and spamming Soul Cleave. Shear, Soul Cleave, and you want to keep up Demon Spikes. And you want to keep up Spirit Bomb. And then if at any point you need a big shield, you use your Archimonde's Trinket if you have it. And that's it. Save your Fiery Brand for a crucial part of the fight. You need the extra mitigation. And that's it. Our damage here, when I was doing this earlier, I'm messing up since I'm talking to you guys, but my damage isn't bad with this rotation. I think I was doing like 330,000 K-ish. So it's not terrible. It's really not that good either on the damage spectrum. So let me jump out of here. Let's look at healing done. Well, I wasn't taking any damage, so you don't see any of the healing because he wasn't hitting me hard enough. But that's the entire rotation. Now, if you take Last Resort, you just will not cast Soul Barrier. If you take Blade Turning, you just don't cast Spirit Bomb. That's really it, guys. That's the entire rotation. The key here is you want to spec, gear, use consumables, and focus on healing yourself in the rotation. And that's simply just shearing and soul cleaving non-stop while keeping up demon spikes. Use your empower wards on any magic damage. Use soul barrier as much as you can. If you need to save it for a big burst, you can do that too, and then use Fiery Brand when you need the mitigation. And that's the entire rotation. And again, you can make it easier by switching to Blade Turning and Last Resort. Or even Soul Rending. I don't recommend it, but you could. So that is the protection build. So when should you use this build? Honestly, this is an old build, like old school style, which is what I called it initially. It's not. In 2017 in Legion, this build is not the best build to use. However, you can use it if you're under geared. So if you're just learning, you're trying to get the gear, this is a good build to use because you're at that moment you're focusing on staying alive, not your damage. You would also use this build on an extremely tough fight where we are likely to die. This could be like Mythic Gul'dan, or maybe even Star Augur. Even then, I don't use this build, but you could. So if there's any fights that you're more than likely going to die on, and your damage is irrelevant, this is the build you would use. The other situation is maybe like a Mythic 20, 22, 24, something like that, so you can live through having like 4 to 8 adds on you at a time. So that is the protection build. Let's go ahead and jump ahead and let's talk about the Scumbag build. So let's talk about the Scumbag build. Now the concept of this build is you have a healer. It is their job to keep you alive. That's that. Like, it's not your responsibility to stay alive. It's their job to put cooldowns on you, to heal you, to spam on you. It's their job to keep you up. And if you die, it's their fault, it's not yours. And your jobs are all about those big DPS numbers. That's it. It's all you care about are the DPS numbers. So your job is to go balls deep and DPS the hell out of whatever you're fighting. So let's look at the talents to do that. So this is the build I would use for a radiant situation. You would run with Razor Spikes for the physical damage. This build is all about rotating around the Fiery Demise window and spamming Fracture at all their times. And Fracture is physical damage. For raiding, Burning Alive is the highest DPS because it gives you a really bad dot, whereas these other ones in a raiding situation does really nothing for damage. For Mythic Plus, you would run with Fallout instead. In 102, you would run Fell Eruption. This is chaos damage, and it does get buffed by Fiery Demise, so this is why you use it. In a Mythic Plus situation, you would run with Flame Crash for the AoE. 104, Fracture, hands down. 106 is the Concentrated Sigil. 108 is Feldev, and 110 is Demonic Infusion. This gives you a charge of demon spikes and refills your charges and gives you 60 pain. Why this is a DPS increase is because of razor spikes. So all of this is set up to maximize your damage. Gear wise, 4 piece is irrelevant because you're not using soul cleave. So you want eye level over 4 piece. For let's see here, for legendaries you can go with the belt. This is huge. You can go with Archimonde's Hatred Reborn as single target if you proc it on cooldown. This does the most amount of damage in a raid fight compared to all other legendaries if you proc it on cooldown. You can use Kill Jaden's Burning Wish for Mythic Plus for AoE packs. Other trinkets you can go with is the Bloodthirsty Instinct. You can go with stat sticks, like here's a Mastery stat stick. You can go with, what else is there? The Urn from Nightbane, but that's just a Mastery stat stick. You can go with the Crit stat stick. So any stat sticks are normally pretty good. Any DPS trinkets from Nighthold are crap. You don't want those ones. So yeah, gear wise is eye level. These legendaries. For stats, you want to go crit, and then mastery, then haste, then versatility. Again, you don't need that damage reduction with versatility because it's not your job to stay alive. That's why you brought a healer. Keep in mind, I don't run this build. So before I even go further, this is not a build I run. But people can run this, people do run this, and it can work. So let me just say that. For consumables, you would use Old Wars for maximum burst. You could use Prolonged Powers in the right situations, but for the most part you want Old War. You would use the Agility Flask, and you would use the Feast for Agility buff. To get that buff, you have to switch to Havoc, eat the Feast, and switch back to Vengeance. It's kind of crappy, but that's how you do it. Yeah, and that should be it. So let's look at the rotation and how this plays. Alright, so the key to this is the 2 cycles, the Fiery Demise window, and when that window's down, you want to accumulate as much pain as possible and then spam the crap out of Fracture. And you want to pull your pain to 100, pop Demon Spikes, then spam Fracture. And other than that, you want to keep everything else on cooldown. Now in this rotation, I'm not going to use the Archimonde's Trinket because this guy can't break it anyway. But the last time I checked in Mythic Crosis, it does well over 7 million damage by itself. It's kind of big. So the rotation is going to start is I'm going to pre-pot and fly through the air at the, I want to say about the 2-ish second mark of the countdown. I'll do the countdown. So I'd land on the pole. Then you want to open with Fiery Brand. That's how you start your Fiery Demise window. Most amount of damage you're going to do is going to be based on maximizing this window. Now, so you go Fiery Brand, open the window, Immolation Aura, Soul Carver. At this point you should have enough for Fell Eruption. Now you want to get your Fell Dev in, but you're going to need to do probably a Shear, maybe 2 to get the pain to do that. And then you're going to Fell Dev. Then you're going to keep using Infernal Slam on cooldown. It is off the GCD. Drop your Flame Sigil. And then at this point, Immolation Aura should be back up. You pop that and you go into your Fracture build. So I'm going to do that at normal speed now. So normally you want to do a countdown. Let's say countdown from, let's say 7. So at the 2-second mark, you're going to pre-pot and then you're going to jump in. 4, 3, pre-pot, jump in, Fiery Brand, Immolate, and then do your Soul Cover into your Fell Eruption, into your Fell Dev, jump, Sigil, start building pain, so your Fracture, Immolation Aura, 100 pain, DS, Fracture Spin. fracture, fracture. Use up all your fractures, slams back up, pop it. Start building pain again. Remember, you don't care about your healing, you have a healer. Keep everything on cooldown, get it back up to 100 pain. Start spamming. Use Foul Eruption on cooldown. Keep spamming. Get back up. Oh, he shrunk on me. And just use everything on cooldown. You're building back towards your Fiery Demise window again. Alright, so we have 7 seconds to Fiery Brand. This is going to reopen the window. So let's get all this out. So, alright, Fiery Brand. Get ready. We're going to go right into a Foul Eruption, into a Fell Devastation. Foul Eruption. Fell Devastation. And then we're back. You do not hold Soul Carver for your Fiery Demise window after the first one. It will line up to every third one, every second one, or something like that. And if you try to save it, you actually lose damage. So use it on cooldown. Now, you should be taking more damage than this in a real situation. More damage equals more pain. That means we can blow our Demon Spike charges faster. So let me just blow all these out. When you're low, you want to pop your Demonic Infusion. You get a stack and a lot of pain, and fracture some more. And that's really it. Use everything on cooldown, maximize your Fiery Demise window, get your pool, your pain to 100, pop Demon Spikes, and fracture, fracture, fracture. Keep everything on cooldown. That's really it. So let's do the last window. Fiery Demise window. There's fell down. We have there you go. So yeah, that's really it. So there might be something I'm missing, but there really isn't much to it. You just want to maximize your Fiery Demise window and the amount of fractures you can put in the same window with the Razor Spikes buff. Now in a situation like that where you're not taking a lot of damage, you might want to pop an extra set of Demon Spikes so you can shear with Demon Spikes up just to build pain up to 100, because if you're sitting at 2 charges of Demon Spikes like I am now, then you're wasting recharge time, because you should never sit at 2 charges of Demon Spikes. So if you see yourself at like 40 pain but you're at 2 charges, just pop Demon Spikes. That way when you're shearing, you're doing 30% more damage with shear, and you're not sitting at 2 stacks or 2 charges of Demon Spikes. It has time to recharge. And like I said, the other way to play this is you want to stand in stuff that you should not be standing in. So for instance, on Trilax, to pop your Archon's Trinket, sometimes I stand in the puddle on the ground. You don't want to do this on progression. But if you need to pop your shield, you stand in the puddle on the ground and you'll pop your shield. Or in Crosis, you should be taunting at 5 stacks, so hey, maybe you tell your co-tank to taunt 7 or 8. Because the more damage you take, more pain you have, and then more damage you do. So the playstyle is dependent on, and let me just say this as well, this is very important, I almost forgot it. Siphon power is huge. So Empower Wards increases the amount of agility you have for 10 seconds based on the damage you take. So you want to keep up maximum uptime of Siphon power at all times. This means you might have to stand in a lot of magic damage to do it. Or on Mythic Crosis, when you have 1 stack of fiery, the dot, the Stirring Brand, or whatever it's called, you pop it at 1 stack. That way you can get Empower Wards back off cooldown even quicker to pop it again. In the protection build, you would wait to 5 stacks to get the maximum efficiency of that damage reduction. But on the Scumbag style, you want to pop it at 1 stack to get the Siphon power up quicker, so you can cast it again quicker to get another stack of Siphon power. Like the biggest part of this is just how you play. And like I said, as long as you don't die, you're going to stand in as much stuff as you can to take as much damage as you can, to do as much damage as you can. So, with that idea, when do you use this? Normally, the only time you want to use this is on farm content. Like when you already outgear something and it's a joke, you don't care, and you want to see how high you can hit this or how hard you can hit this boss. So you're trying to parse on farm content. However, keep in mind, you have to tell your healers you're going to do it. You're going to be squishy, really squishy, and they have to know you're going to do it, and they have to be able to heal you through it. And they also have to be willing to do it. Because even if they could do it, they might not want to because they might think you're going to be a scumbag, and you are. So they're like, you know what, if you're going to scumbag, I'm not going to heal you, and you're going to die. So you need to have healers aware that you're doing it, healers capable of pulling it off, and healers wanting to let you do it. You normally do not see this on progression ever. And I'm sure there's one or two people that are going to be like, yo, I use this build all the time for progression, it's great. And I'm sure there are people that do it. But for the general rule of thumb, you do not use this on progression. Use this on farm content. For artifact traits, by the way, this is right here. You want 7 points in Fiery Demise to up your Fiery Demise window. And the amount of damage you do. The length of time is increased, but the damage you do. So with 3 relics, you can get 7 out of 7, which is 70% damage. So, yeah, this is the Scumbag style. So let's go ahead and look at the hybrid style. Okay, let's finish off the last style, and I like to call this one the hybrid style. Now this is the style that I personally play. At the end of this, I'm going to show you some numbers and compare the styles that way with logs. But this is the style I play. My viewpoint is this: protection style is outdated. If you're not dying, you need to be maximizing your damage, because there are a lot of fights in Mythic progression that have breakpoints. If you don't hit those breakpoints, you're going to wipe. And if you can pull 200k more damage as a tank, that's 200k less damage that other people have to cover. And assuming if you're not dying, that's what you need to be doing. So this style is the style I use, the style I recommend. And how this works is you gear mainly as protection, and then you play as if you're scumbagging in areas that you're able to. What do I mean? Well, let's look at talents first. First off, Razor Spikes, 100%. For Mythic Plus, you'd run with Fallout. For Raiding, run with Burning Alive. Raiding, use Fell Eruption. Mythic Plus, use Flame Crash. 104 Fracture, 106 Concentrated, 108 Fell Devastation, and 110 Soul Barrier. So this is almost identical to the Scumbag build, except instead of Demonic Infusion, I'm using Soul Barrier because it's an amazing healing ability. Gear wise, I'm gearing as much as I can towards defensive, so I'm using a Pride S and an Archimonde's Trinket. Now, see, Archimonde's Trinket's amazing because it gives you a ton of defensive stats like versatility and mastery, and a ton of agility. And the damage from the shield does a lot of damage. So it gives you both offensive and defensive, so it sort of flexes. I use the Dark Moon deck for almost everything except Croesus and Augur. Unless I forget to take it off and then make a video about it, like my Augur video. Anyways, yeah, you don't use this for Augur or Croesus, but everything else I use it for. Because, again, I'm building protective. Now, consumables, I use... Actually, here, let me talk about the other legendary. I use Cloak of Fell Flames on Augur and Croesus. The whole idea is you want to mitigate as much magic damage and fights have heavy magic damage. In this situation, it depends on how the fight is. I'll either bench Pridus or bench the Trinket depending on the fight. On Augur, I'll probably bench the Trinket. On Croesus, I'll bench Pridus. So, it just depends. Another legendary, and I mentioned this already before in the protective style, the Bell I would use on Mythic Tichondrius for survival. Consumables. Now this is where I use more offensive consumables. I use the Agility Flask. I use the Feast. Switch to Havoc, E to get the Agility buff. I will use normally Potion of Old War on the pull and as my second pot, because I'm trying to maximize my damage using a defensive build. I'm not going to show you the play style, because I played this identical to the Scumbag style minus 2 changes. So I'm going to use Fiery Brand on the pull to open up the Fiery Demise window, and then do my rotation. And every time I Fiery Brand, I'm going to start the rotation again. I'm going to maximize the amount of fractures I use, and minimize the amount of soul cleaves I have. Because of this, the 4-piece is not very important, except on Mythic Tichondrius, and maybe Phase 1 of Botanist. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Or high Mythic pluses where you're going to be soul cleaving trash. 4-piece is great. So the rotation is set around the Scumbag style. The only difference is on the fights that I need more survivability, I spec and I play with more survivability. Meaning on Mythic Spellblade, if I was Scumbagging, I would open up with Fiery Brand and start my Fiery Demise window and maximize my damage, and leave it to my healers to keep me alive for the Annihilate. But with the hybrid style, I don't do that. I save Fiery Brand for the second Annihilate and always the second Annihilate. So I'm playing as much offensively as possible when I'm able to. I will still stand in a Trilix Puddle if I need to proc my Archmon Trinket, but once it procs, I get out of it. My off tank will always taunt at 5 stacks on Croesus. So it's the combination of both protection and the Scumbag. I gear for protection, I consumable like Scumbag, and then I DPS as hard as I can every place that I can. And then on the fights where I need to be conservative, I will play more conservatively. Speaking is hard. And Tichondrius is another one where I don't always go all out. I end up scumbagging numbers there because I 6 tank slimes, so I always parse high because it's just stupid crazy damage. Yeah, so I'm not gonna show you the rotation, but the idea is every second that you can ounce out even a little more damage, assuming it does not risk your life, you do that. And in the times where you have to take a step back from damage, you do that. So, like most things in life, it's better to have everything in moderation. So I love the hybrid style because it does this. And in most fights in Mythic, I will never parse over 95%. Because I'm not going full Scumbag, and I won't go full Scumbag. And being the raid leader of my guild, it's hard for me to justify going full Scumbag. It's just like a mental block. Yeah, but even though I don't go full Scumbag and I won't parse over 95 unless I get lucky. I had a 98% parse on Tichondrius because the other tank died and it refreshed the HP of the slimes. Even though I won't parse over 95, rarely do I parse under 90. So I normally float around the 90 to 95 range on most fights. Now, my scope run parse will never be high because I tank the boss, not the ads. I guess I could always spend 1 week and switch them, but again, it's farm content and I just don't care. And then like on Spellblade, I will never parse over, I think my highest was like 84% because I save all my cooldowns just to survive. If I wanted to this coming week, I could just go full Scumbag, get a high parse and be happy, but I wouldn't do that to my healers. So hybrid style is how I recommend to play. So let's look at numbers and finish this up. Alright guys, so let's finish this video up by looking at logs. I'm comparing my logs as a hybrid tank to the logs of a Scumbag tank and the logs of a protection tank. Now, this is just some random samplings about the for the Scumbag is the within the top 50 of Trilix, Mythic, Epic Trilix, because there isn't anything really crazy going on with Trilix. Like each tank will have the boss for half the time. You're on the boss for the majority of the time. There's nothing really crazy going on, so I'm just gonna use that as a baseline. This will vary based on which fight we're actually looking at. And I'm also only comparing one of each. I looked through the logs of a few other people, and they're about the same, not much variance. So we're just going to look at 3 of these here. So let's look at DPS first. So I found Delimit's logs up on Warcraft Logs. He's one of the moderators in the Discord channel. So he's considered a Scumbag DPS because that's how he's building for this Trilix fight. So if you look at how much damage he did, he parsed at 97th percentile, and he did 507,000 DPS. So 97th percentile, 507k. Then we look at the Prot tank's DPS. This guy was in the top 50 for healing, for self-healing, by the way, for Mythic Tricks. This is how I found this guy. And there's something weird about these logs, which I'll talk about in a minute when I get there. But his DPS was 285,000. So, Delimit is doing almost double the damage of this protection style warrior. Or not warrior, jeez. Vengeance, DH. I was looking at warriors earlier today. And then if you look at my damage from last week for Mythic Trilix, I pulled 441k DPS. So that's the 92nd percentile, or 96 for the eye level. So Delimit's doing 60k more DPS than me. And I'm doing, what, just some math, like 180k more than the protection warrior. So that's the damage between the 3. Now let's look at the healing done. So let's look at the protection style first, and he did 196,000 healing. Whereas Delimit did 39,000 healing per second, which is pretty funny. And then as the hybrid style, I did pull this up. Keep flipping through screens if you notice that. 124,000 healing per second. So the protection warrior did 60k more healing per second than I did. And I did 90k more than Delimit. So there's a big difference in healing performed on on these logs. So the protection style is definitely putting out a lot more healing. And I believe he wasn't even using a Spirit Bomb in this log, because I couldn't find anybody who matched exactly what I was looking for when I told you guys how to build that style. So I don't think he was even using Spirit Bomb. He did 196,000 healing per second. And then here's where the logs get really weird, because your healing per second doesn't matter as much when you compare it to how much external healing you need. This means how much focus do the healers have to put on you. And I know, and I realize now, but it's late, is that if you look at healing done, that's probably not a good indication of how much healing you needed from the healers themselves. So if we look at the protection style here, and this is where it gets a little wonky. This guy needed 204,000 healing per second. 204,000. And then you compare it to my hybrid, and my hybrid only needed 131,000. So even though he did that much more healing than I did, he required 70k more healing per second than I did. And I looked at probably like 6 or 7 logs of the top healing builds, or the people who are at the top of the healing charts. and most of them average between 160 to 220 external healing. That means, which makes sense if you think about it, if they're taking that much more damage, then they're healing themselves for that much more because it's not going to overheal. So it makes sense, but I was running out of time of finding good logs for this. But then you look at the Scumbag healing required here. Let me find it. And he required 167,000. So if you just compare the healing I needed to the Scumbag, to Delimit's charts here. I'm not calling him a Scumbag, by the way, it's just his style. He required 40k more healing per second than I did. And when talking about farm content, honestly, that's not a big deal. Now, if you're talking about progression content, where you have to 2 or 3 heal like we did at the beginning of Mythic NH, 40k HPS on a DH could be a problem. So there's a huge trade-off here. I'm in the hybrid is better boat here because I'm doing a lot of damage, even though I'm not hitting Scumbag levels. I'm still doing quite a bit of damage. Very well. It's like having half of a good DPS, or you know, an average DPS in your team, just as the tank. And the healing I required was much lower than Scumbag as well. So, for all-round purpose, I'm all about having the hybrid style here. And farm content, running with the Scumbag is perfectly fine if your healers can keep them up, because you do require a lot more healing. But you're able to push the upper echelons of the DPS. In this situation, he did 60k more than I did. And then the Proud Warrior will output more healing for sure. And if he plays properly, meaning aka don't stand in fire on the ground, or don't get hit by beams, or don't do this, then he should require less healing as well. But the logs I could find in a short period of time, I couldn't find it. So yeah, that really concludes the video. I hope it was informative. I hope it helps people and understand that, you know, no way is the best way. They all have their own little niches of when you should use the builds. For progression, I'm all about that hybrid deeps. Keeps your option open. So if you liked the video, if you found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up or subscribe, and leave any questions in the comments below. Thank you for watching.